are saying, not just saying, what they've been able to demonstrate is that, look, what we did here 2 years, 3 years ago is working, right? And now we want to take it forward. We want to move it forward. And the way we do that is establishing financial sovereignty. You're saying that is bogus. That cannot happen, because the only way that happens is if all of Africa come together. Well, this is the path.
It just takes countries to start, and that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, but you can't run on motivational speeches. You can't actually run a state on motivational speeches. You don't run a state.
So let me ask.
You can't substitute.
Let me ask
They're giving you financial contributions. They've laid out a game plan for what they're planning to do, right? And you're still saying that they're running on a motivational speech.
Let me ask a quick question, okay. Right? So these countries, the 3 AES nations, combined control about 50% of the world's gold reserves. 50%. Let's just start with gold. Do you not see how, right, if leveraged properly, that could be transformational? Hello, my people. Welcome back to this week's Breakdown Panel. You know, before we start, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for engaging with us week after week. The comments, the debates, the perspectives, you all are really what make this space powerful. You know, we're not always going to agree, and that is perfectly fine. But what matters is that we have the same wish, which is to see our beloved continent and our communities rise to their potential. So keep adding your voice. We're listening, we're paying attention, we're engaging, and keep showing up every Sunday. And let's keep pushing these conversations forward, because listen, they are needed now more than ever. So let's welcome back our panelists, Mylin Kin, political and social commentator, Ni Sarpe Intre, researcher of African geopolitics, and Fanta Kamara, global affairs analyst. Panelists, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Sandra. How are you doing?
Okay, Mylin, what's funny?
Why is everyone laughing?
I didn't say anything.
I'm like ready for anything.
It's good to be back. That's all I can say. It's just good to be back.
It's good to be back. And Ni is ready. So, you know, before we dive into today's topics, is there anything from last week that you all want to sound off on really quickly?
Right. So,
Ni, I'll start with you. Now, yeah. I know you caught a lot of heat from viewers, last week when you asked, what does Africa bring to the table? So do you perhaps want to clarify what you meant by that question?
I mean, yeah, obviously. I do think that criticisms are welcomed, and I am up for them, especially if they are criticisms that are engineered towards realizing the Africa that we all want to see. I'm sure in the minds of every person who loves Africa, there is this thing, or there's this place we want to get to. And so I welcome criticism from all of these people. And yeah, it adds to the magnificence of the conversation that we can have. Mm-hmm. What does Africa bring to the table? I think it's a question that was taken out of context, especially because I was just trying to ask, what is a comparative advantage Africa has, really? And there are comparative advantages that Africa has. We probably are the most gifted natural resource continent. It's a continent that is teeming with very young people. I've always said that as a critic of capital, really, my fear for Africa in the next 10 years will be the fact that it's slowly growing middle class. And slowly growing middle class would present the next frontier for capital investment, which actually means that African sovereignty of African states is at risk in the next 10 years. All these investments in AI, all these investments in new tech will be trialed and experimented on the continent. I bet you we'll be here 10 years and you actually tell me I was right about that. So these are things that actually gives me concerns. But I do understand that at the moment we have certain advantages that we need to leverage. And so the question was basically asking what are our advantages? What exactly do we have that the world needs? And I'm sure that if we find out those things, we can leverage on that to build foreign policies that would inure to the benefit of all Africans. Because foreign policies at the end of the day are based on the tools you already have, right? Every geostrategy is based on the tools you have, not your aspirations. You aspire to a certain thing, but you build your policies and your plans on the things you already have. So I would like to understand what everyone thinks Africa has, what obviously is there, and then upon these grounds, we can actually build policies that are durable and sustainable. So yeah, I think it's a question that was taken out of context, but anyway.
Well, thanks for clarifying that, because I think that's very important. Now, last week, let's get into this week's discussion, which is all connected to the point that you just made, right? Last week, we ended on a very clear point, which is that Africa has struggled to rise because it's been subservient to the West, playing by the rules that don't serve our interests, right? And at the very heart of that problem is capital. We've built nations on borrowed money. We've negotiated from a place of weakness and continue to sell off our resources for a fraction of their value. And we all agree that if we want real change, we have to rethink how we finance our future and who we also partner with. So today we will unpack exactly that. Now, this week, Ethiopia made history. It just launched Africa's first self-funded hydroelectric dam. No IMF money, no World Bank money, no Chinese loans. This was all domestically funded. So what lessons can we take from that? And then last month, Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré and the AES also announced their plans to launch a new investment bank that will be funded by 5% of their tax revenue. So they've already committed to 5% of their revenue to the bank to fund critical infrastructure, right? So they want to say no to foreign capital and really start thinking about how they can build their nations on their own. And so we'll talk about that. And then I also want to get your perspectives on how diaspora capital can be mobilized more effectively in these times to fuel Africa's rise. So let's jump in with the big news, right, from this week. Let's start there with Ethiopia's historic self-funded $5 billion dam. This was done through a combination of public bond sales, donations, and contributions from citizens and the Ethiopian diaspora. The domestic funding model was a source of national pride and unity, which allowed the project to proceed without foreign loans or aid, despite diplomatic tensions with neighboring countries like Egypt. So there's a lot to unpack there. So Fanta, let's start with you. What can you tell us about the JIRD, right, which is what we're calling it, and its significance at this moment, given that it truly is one of the largest domestically funded projects in Africa?
Yeah, I think we can probably say like the world, right? So I just want to chime in a little bit to the earlier point of, to quantify even more about what Africa brings to the table. I think we have to, it's really important to qualify, right? We can say we have minerals, we have this, we have that. It's more important to quantify that, because when you're talking about where do you begin, right, in terms of leverage and having conversations of negotiation, you have to be able to combine the both. So the qualitative aspect is really important, but quantitatively, we're talking about 30% of the world's minerals, right? 65% of arable land. It's in Africa. 60% of the world global's solar capacity, 75% of the world's global cocoa, right? The $130 billion chocolate industry, right? It's heavily supported by Africa. I mean, we can name just two countries, Ghana and the Ivory Coast, right? So when we talk about what Africa brings to the table, Africa is the table, right? The very wood that the table is made off of comes from African timber, right? The sun, the mineral, right? So our problem isn't, once again, I continue to stress this, capacity is leverage. It's understanding those figures like quantitatively to be able to then, right, compute, right, to say, look, if you're bringing 100 billion, I can look at my 30% mineral, right, and see what is going to be fair in terms of where we land. So Africa is the whole entire table, and until we understand that power, right, we'll continue to be guest when we should really be like the host. So just to put a button on that,
Yeah.
and then, excuse me, when it comes to the JERD, right? The Grand Ethiopian Dam. It is monumental. It goes to show that, look, you can say all day that Africa is incapacitated. Africa does not have the money, right? We should be reliant upon Western partnerships to fund Africa's infrastructure and Africa's growth. This is a demonstration, an illustration that no, you're absolutely wrong. There's no point to even mince words about that. You're absolutely wrong, whoever says that, because this is demonstrating just that. Yeah, I mean, this project started in 2011, and it took about 14-ish years for it to be completed. So have many other large, massive infrastructure engineering projects. So the timeline takes nothing away from this accomplishment. The fact that this was funded by the people of Ethiopia, both on the continent and in the diaspora. I'm so proud of my Ethiopian brothers and sisters. I mean, I am overwhelmed with joy that once again, we can demonstrate that, look, if our leaders present clear vision, right? Very clear vision and a strategy of how to implement that vision, the people will sacrifice. We will sacrifice. I mean, people give up their monthly salaries, right? People bought bonds at as low as $15. So this is not something that requires this massive amount of contribution. Everyone understood that this was a symbol of pride, a symbol of dignity, a symbol of sovereignty, a symbol of self-reliance. Therefore, I have to dig in my pocket. I was watching a clip, of an Ethiopian who lived in a hut. Ethiopian who lived in a hut, right? Who also contributed. And the fact that we can reach, right? We can reach those people. It puts a complete bust, right? It busts the bubbles of everyone who says that, no, Africa cannot do it. Africa does not have the money. And this is just a completely a proud moment for Africa. And I could not be more proud. And I will end with this. It says to those African leaders, those other African leaders, right? For example, there's been concerns around the implication to Egypt and Sudan. Look, the one thing I'm really proud of the Ethiopian leadership for doing was the low number of displacement, the zero to none displacement that happened when this dam was being constructed, right? The Aswan Dam in Egypt displaced 100,000 Nubians. 100,000. And this is far smaller than what has been put up here in Ethiopia, right? And you look at that and they're complaining about the impact to their people. And it's like, where is the motivation? Who's really pushing you to want to discourage this project from happening? Because it cannot be you, right, as an African brother to your Ethiopian brother, looking at this monumental feat to say, I cannot support you. Whose interest are you serving, right?
I think one of their concerns too, Fanta, they're concerned about drought, right? That over time they just won't have enough. What the project will drain, all the water. So is that something that they should be? Is that a real concern?
It's a concern. But like every project, there are risks, right? What do you do as the person, right? Or if you feel you are going to be the one most impacted by that risk, you have a conversation with the project lead or whoever is funding like the project to say, hey, these are my concerns, integrated into your risk mitigation plans, right? That's how you solve that problem. You don't solve that problem by picking up a microphone and standing up on top of Washington, D.C. to call your brother out, rather than just going to knock on his door and say, hey, can we have this conversation? This is how I feel I will be impacted. Right? It's very realistic, and we cannot ignore that. But African leaders really need to move away from this cowardice. And it even makes me like wonder, why is it that most of them, a good 90+% of them, are not able to put forth any type of infrastructure accomplishment as such? Is it because they're on the Epstein list? Are African leaders being blackmailed? Is that why they are cowards?
So I'm going to go to Nia and Mylin to get your perspectives on that, all right? And to Fanta's point, let's be clear that Ethiopia actually did, when the initial idea for the project came, they did approach the IMF and the World Banks, and those institutions, but they were under sanctions, and they pretty much said, no, we're not going to fund it unless you go with our terms, right? And so they were forced to find another way. So, I mean, what does this tell us, right, Nia and Mylin? And does this prove that Africa's biggest challenge is not money, but leadership and political will, when you look at how Ethiopia was able to bring this to life?
So where I'll start with this is, for me, when I did my homework on this, what impressed me is that the education was there, right? Obviously, because this is building a dam. And the willingness was there. So when I see that this happened 100% within the country itself, it says that this is what I think societies are built on. It takes a certain level of leadership to get things established.
Yeah.
And to me, I would say you can focus on how long it took, sure, but the truth of the matter is, did it get accomplished?
But who's complaining? Are people complaining about how long it took?
Well, I think as people tend to look at the fact that Africa did it, that's what the next play would be. You see, and you look in any civilization, because there wasn't a comparator versus to say, look at how long it took to make most of America. Nobody cared. They were okay with going the years that it took. For an African country to do this, this is a great symbol to me that we can do this. Let's focus on being exact, specific, instead of the speed. Because now that's something that we have a history to say, hey, we went to the World Bank. They said no because of sanctions. But we as a team, somebody living in a hut donating.
I mean, my God, what a story.
That says the world, that the continent, the country itself wants to say we did this. And to me, that matters the most. And I think if we can replicate certain things across the continent, certain projects, this bodes well for us.
Me?
Yeah, Sandra. So Fanta has actually talked about the importance of having something like that. But I'd like to look at two things. The first has to do with how the Ethiopian government under Abiy Ahmed actually rallied the nation towards this particular project, right? Mm-hmm. This was something that was core to Ethiopian identity. I read a piece written by the ambassador ambassador to the United Kingdom, the Ethiopian ambassador to the United Kingdom, and he was talking about how the Renaissance Dam was core or is core to Ethiopian identity. Ethiopian identity that wants to express itself in sustenance and sovereignty. And so it was actually very, very necessary to market the idea of energy sufficiency as something that is everyone's business. And that's a very critical point. We often talk about how African leaders are not interested or are incapable of taking plans and making them realities. But in this case, this is a man who has to, and is still dealing with instability in the north of the country, right? So I look at that in terms of the instability at home, how he's managed that. I mean, there are questions that we can raise about how the Ethiopian government, Addis Ababa, has treated Tigray. But that notwithstanding, he's managed that vis-a-vis pulling off what is probably the biggest hydroelectric power project until maybe we see the Inga Dam completed in the DR Congo. The Inga Dam, for all those listening, is probably, if it is actually done, will be the biggest hydroelectric power project in the world. And it's supposedly going to generate something about 6 gigawatts, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be a lot of electricity, probably enough to power the whole of.
Is this also being domestically funded?
No,
it's not even started.
but
It's not
it's
even
all
started off.
funded.
Yeah. So Congo is actually looking for funds for that, but there's a lot of push and pull on whether on how it's going to be done, especially again with the instability in the DRC.
Yeah.
So we keep our fingers crossed on that. But then it's important to note that Abiy Ahmed was fulfilling a lifelong expectation for Ethiopians while managing a very, very unstable situation in the north of the country. That is one. The second thing is transboundary, conversations on transboundary resources. And transboundary resources are not uncommon to Africans, right? The Great Lakes region, involves about 10 or 11 countries. I think about 10 countries, right? So these are 10 countries who are all sharing waters in their neighborhood. Transboundary resources also have to do with animals that can be in one country at one time, and then they make an exodus to another country. Sometimes when you have to go for your what's it called? The people would go for the safari visits in Kenya. Sometimes you'll be told, "Oh, the animals are not there this time around." You'd have to wait for them to come around.
They're visiting Ghana. They'll be back soon.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So the animals actually move to other countries and all of that. And that is also considered as transboundary resources, right? Because the animal flights also determine what countries can charge for tourism at whatever point. So transboundary resource management is a very, very important part of anything we would consider as African integration going forward. And so for someone like myself, I would really, really love for Ethiopia and Egypt and Sudan, who are downstream countries, to find a solution. It's not as if there's no template for them to build upon. There are templates, but I think for a lot of these countries, even African countries, are not immune to looking at situations like this in very, very competitive terms, right? It's still very, when I say they look at it in very competitive terms, they don't especially think about the possibility of Ethiopian energy being something that would be important for African integration, at least in the Northeast.
Say that Egypt has a chip on its shoulder, right? So back in the 1920s, the colonial powers, Britain, right, give Egypt 80% control of the Nile. They're complaining today, rather than just really resolving this on a more fraternal level, right? As your brother in Ethiopia, let's sit at the table and have a conversation.
Yeah, so I'll come to
Britain
I'll come to that.
80% control of the Nile while they're downstream. The Nile originates in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is upstream. Egypt is downstream. Sudan is downstream. So this is not an issue to where, right, you can sit there and pick up a microphone and stand on top of Washington, D.C. You do not have a control.
In fairness to Egypt.
Everyone does Ethiopia does. So sit at the table with Ethiopia and have a conversation. And they have shown and demonstrated they are willing to do that. So Egypt,
right, sure.
Resolve this, it's on them, frankly.
In fairness to the Egyptians, they've actually used every tool within African continental governance structures. They've actually used the AU. They've used a third country to negotiate. They've also gone outside of the continent to the Middle East to even co-opt the help of the Emiratis. So it's not just Washington. They are not just complaining to Washington. And again, the complaints to Washington, yeah, but the complaints to Washington is even a betrayal of what I hope to see, right? But what I'm trying to get at is that even African countries look at resources in a competitive manner, as if they are competing against each other. And that is because it's very, very difficult for these countries to think outside the boundaries of nationalism. They do not usually think about they don't usually think about things in terms of African integration. It's about competition. It's about what I can do with the power I have within these boundaries, and that's one thing that actually makes it difficult to negotiate a very palatable situation. But then I do hope because again we risk a full on battle between two of Africa's most well endowed militaries if this spills over.
Yeah.
And so I hope they do actually find an amenable
solution and way forward
to it. Yeah, exactly.
And this is a critical conversation to be had, right? Because we're talking about shared resources, right? And to your point, shared resources in a place where there are boundaries, right? And this is not unique to Africa. It's not unique to Africa. This is a global issue. You hear this all the time with this country saying, well, that's mine, right? The border shouldn't start here. Well, that's my, source of water or electricity. Don't touch that. How do they usually resolve these issues, right? And for us, realistically, in Africa, what tools or strategies or resolution mechanisms are available for us, realistically?
Well, I think...
So...
Let me just jump in.
Yeah,
okay, sure.
Mylan, go for it.
Listening to this, it sounds these are two countries that are just having a dispute over who's going to do what, as you mentioned, from a competitive stance, right, Nee? Here we are I do feel basing yourself on the old way of how African countries run. This is why we're having these hiccups right now. No progression is going to happen if you, as the countries, cannot come and sit at the table and find that way. And I think you brought up some valid points about getting other people to be a part of it, but the only two who can fix it are these countries. Because we can say all of these things, and you mentioned about them going to war, but it still doesn't solve the problem. And that's what I believe with us. This is when I say we have to be the ones to fix this for ourselves. We can't solve everything in a barbaric way. Oh, well, I'm going to fight you over it. It needs to say, how does this benefit our side? How does this benefit your side?
This is a source of electricity, right? So for the region, Ethiopia is planning to sell or import electricity to the neighboring countries, right? And when you look at the geostrategic, right, implications of the Nile Basin in general, this is a very, very important project. So how does this help them assert their sovereignty and really push forward what we've been preaching and talking about here on the show?
I think to simplify it, there are a few things we can consider life's necessities, right?
Yeah.
Especially in this age of 2025. Food, right? So agriculture, electricity, health. Those are baseline, right? For any civilization. And this being a necessity, the fact that Ethiopia has been able to accomplish this says to the world and says to the rest of Africa that, look, not only can we do this, but we will demonstrate that we are able to do it, which they have been able to do. And because it is essential, right?
Yeah.
It is life or death for us. I mean, this is impacting, the farmers for irrigations. You're talking about, when you're really talking about sovereignty, what makes a sovereign nation? it's not just the utterance, right? That we want to be sovereign and we're going to resort to violence to do that, say a coup or militarily or what have you, but to say, look, we have to consider our basic necessities. We have to understand that until we can produce those and rely on ourselves, right? God first, rely on God, rely on those capabilities given to us by God to produce that stability for us and our people. We would never be self-reliant. We would never attain that level of sovereignty that we absolutely seek. So electricity is absolutely one of them, right? Energy is one of them. The ability for it to be able to impact the lives of every single member, right, of Ethiopia, or maybe we can say, I think currently is 60 million, and that is massive in itself. And if nothing else, that is a significant push to their sovereignty and their pride, that directly feeds into their dignity. I want to, just go back like a little bit, and it's going to be very, very quick. Egypt's concerns are valid to say, I have these concerns. I raise my hand. Hey, how can we resolve this? You resolve this by once again engaging in dialogue with the person who is building, right, this infrastructure. And Ethiopia has been very much open and willing to have these dialogues. Egypt reaching out to outsiders, right, external parties like I know Nee mentioned not only Washington but also the Emiratis and others. It signifies this.
They first used the AU. Actually, they actually first contacted the AU.
AU is made up of all of the African nations, and when our discussions in the past of AU have demonstrated that the AU does not serve Africa's benefit, right? The AU was not established for Africa because the AU is funded by the West. We already established that. So we can really just erase that from the table of having any type of power or influence to mitigate or to resolve the issue between, say, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. So let's remove the AU. You mentioned the Emiratis. Now, there is a real problem, if I can simplify it, going on in Africa, right? While the individual countries are fighting for their sovereignty, there's been this push. I had a conversation with an Arab African about a few months ago who shared with me that the Arab countries, the northern countries, they were pushing heavily the US to be distinguished differently from other Africans, so like Black Africa. They've been pushing, right, for a very long time to be distinguished as Arab Africans, right, or more related to the Arab aspect than even be considered African. This is it's an issue of superiority. This is not an issue of, look, we have a problem and we cannot resolve it. Egypt and the North Arabs consider themselves superior over Black Africa. This is a real problem.
Yeah,
it's a real problem. So let's really move away from this. Oh, Egypt didn't just look to the West. Egypt also looked to the Emiratis. They look to the Emiratis because they consider themselves to be Arabs. They don't consider themselves to be Africans. We have to understand that this problem is happening amongst us. And these are one of the reasons why when we talk about Africa unity, I'm not saying it's impossible. But there are forces who are actively working to ensure that doesn't happen. And they're Africans.
I wouldn't want to speak about the Arabification of Egyptian foreign policy. Egypt is actually very pertinent to both the Arab world and what Fanta would probably call Black Africa. Egypt has been a friend of, again, what Fanta would call Black Africa for a very long time. And so I wouldn't want to say this is basically a problem of Egyptian prioritization of their Arab identity. I don't think it's that's the problem. I think what we are looking at is a consequence of decades-long intentional undermining of the AU. I said this in our very first conversation that African leaders have intentionally undermined the AU in the way that they are actually afraid of transcendental governance, right? They are actually very, very, very concerned about transcendental governance. By transcendental governance, I'm referring to the idea that there is this power that is above the nation state, which can tell them to do this or that, which can actually come down hard on them on issues of human rights, which can actually negotiate on continental levels on things such as energy, agriculture. The African leadership, the leadership class, has intentionally undermined the possibility that the African Union can be that forceful and strong transcendental government. And so this is the consequence of undermining a continental body that could have actually mediated capably. Listen, there are so much, bodies of knowledge regarding transborder resource management. I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I've actually been writing on this particular topic over the last 2 weeks, as if I knew we were going to talk about it. But then the point still remains that these bodies of knowledge, which again, research done by Africans for Africans, lie in European libraries or even in African libraries, and no one will implement them because there's no transcendental government. There's no, in where I come from in Ghana, they will tell you there's no elder in your home, basically. There's no one above these nation states that would like to lock horns.
What is your
my point is that we are actually seeing the consequence of undermining the AU. And so if this is a situation that could provide an opportunity for the AU to basically reinvent itself, or at least find a need to reconfigure itself, okay? Because this problem will not be solved by outside forces. I agree with you on that. It will not be solved by outside forces. But then it also means that transcendental government or continental government on the African continent must be strong.
What's the solution?
It must be strong.
Yeah,
the solution.
I'm sorry to
the solution to what? No, it's a solution to what?
Look, and I hear
no, Mylan. The solution to what exactly? I wanted to understand.
This transcontinental conflict, right? What is the solution, Nee? How do we resolve it?
We need to resolve this by African governments connecting their national development projects to a continental liberation movement.
How?
That is it. How? It requires things. It requires strengthening regional bodies like ECOWAS, SADC.
When we know ECOWAS and the AU doesn't serve Africa, so realistically,
again, this idea that no one, Fanta. Last week you mentioned the fact that Africa continuously is undermined by experts and policy analysts and all of that. I am from Africa as well. And I've also been frustrated by people in suits consistently telling us that they have this, they found this and found that, but that never ever seem to, or my people never seem to get the benefits of these things. So I also have been, frustrated by people in suits. But you know what I won't do? I won't throw away the ability to build on empirical basis just because I'm frustrated with past experts. We consistently throw out names like Nkrumah and Nyerere. These people were not right-wing African nationalists going, hoorah, I'm African, I can do it. These people were left-wing internationalists. They were left-wing internationalists who actually realized that anything you would want to do as an African, you stand at a crossroad. You stand and the crossroad is basically the fact that there are people who conceive or construe geopolitics as competition, as a competition to expand your sphere of influence and your sphere of security. It will be very, very imaginative and inventive on our part to think of a geopolitics that is not necessarily about siding with who has more guns and who has more bombs.
I'll let you jump in.
It would be very pertinent.
Fanta and Mylan, let me get a quick reaction from Fanta and Mylan.
Yeah, listen, you said a lot, and to me, what I hear is it is time for change in leadership overall, right? And I understand this is very simplified that I'm saying, right, Nee? You'll probably view it as that. But this is what this boils down to, because a lot of it is historical referencing of how it was done. None of this talks about what's moving the needle today. None of this is talking. And for me, and I'm going to tell you as like, let's say a person who's trying to reestablish their relationship with Africa, why would I be interested if all of my references are 1965 and later? Because we've learned more over the time, right? As far as it goes about with Egypt, I don't want to, this isn't the podcast for that, but I agree with Fanta's point about that superiority complex. There was a point in time where you would almost believe Egypt was not North Africa, and now with their, connection with the UAE, their presentation is, hey, we're kind of more this way. And unfortunately, Ethiopia is positioned to look more like a typical African country. So I can understand why you would go everywhere else.
You know why this is a bit funny?
Sure.
It's a bit funny because I've also interacted with people on the continent. I mean, traveling across the continent.
Sure.
And I don't take them seriously because I don't think it gets us to the solution we need. The accusations I've had accusations of people saying Ethiopians don't look at themselves as black people. Eritreans don't look at themselves as black people. Basically, the people of the Horn of Africa do not look at themselves as black people. I don't know if any of you have heard that before.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be bogged down by conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
I do not want to be bogged down by conspiracy theories. I actually would like to find basis for African integration and African cordiality. I do not want to be bogged down by who sees themselves as African or not. It really doesn't help anyone.
So I want to move on, right? I want to move on because I want to get to the AES, which is all connected to the conversations that we're having. But Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, better known as the Alliance of Sahel States, have announced plans to launch an investment bank to be funded solely by them. The bank will fund critical infrastructure projects, and they have all committed 5% of their revenue to the bank. So, Nee, let's start with you. Is this a game changer?
Why are you starting with me on the Burkina Faso issue? Anyway, Sandra, I'm always proud of African ingenuity. Seriously, I'm really proud of African ingenuity. I'm proud of African attempt at self-sustenance, attempt at exerting sovereignty.
Nee, that sounds like you're saying, "Oh, nice try." Yeah, I appreciate the nice try, but
please let me land.
Go for it.
Anyway, so yeah, I'm proud of any attempt to exert sovereignty. I guess what my problem is that they are looking to raise 500 billion CFA francs, which is just about $1 billion. I don't know how much that would cover, but again, someone would argue that it's only the beginning. But then you'd have to look at the vehicle with which they are trying to do it. They are trying to do it in the same old.
I keep hearing you not giving an opportunity for development. I'm going to say you're sounding like someone who's saying to me, "Hey, when you get in first grade, by Friday you should be in 12th grade."
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But
that's not what I'm saying.
Sounds like you're saying.
This is what I'm saying.
You said that.
This is what I'm saying.
Mylan, let him finish his point.
Mylan, let me finish. So, yeah, it's an attempt to exert African sovereignty, and I'm sure it's well-intentioned. The problem is that they are actually trying to raise capital. They're trying to raise capital the same way investment banks across the world try to raise capital. Mm-hmm. In the same way capitalism runs. And like I keep saying, I am a critic of capital. So the point for me is, what sort of powers are you letting go by having investors who are not necessarily pro Burkina Faso, pro Mali, and pro Niger. What powers, what vulnerabilities are you exposing? Because remember that this seed investment you are looking for, they've opened the doors to countries in the Gulf, countries in Asia, countries across Africa. There's even suggestion that the Ethiopian sovereign wealth fund may even, chip in. I would like to see the Ethiopian sovereign wealth fund chip in, but then African countries themselves may not necessarily be willing to chip in, especially because not every country in Africa has a sovereign wealth fund. And so I'm very, very skeptical about whether, one, they can raise the money, and two, even if they do raise the money, they still are on a path that
they're concerned about the strings that will be attached.
But then raising money is in the same way that Western lenders basically give you money on the international market will not cure you of the problems that come with outside lending. It wouldn't cure.
Okay.
It wouldn't necessarily cure. For me, that's the thing,
It's with anything with when you're building, right? And you get people to invest in it. Will there be strings? Sure. It's the volume of strings. Look, last week, to Fonta's point, it needs to be mutually beneficial. And what I get from you, Nee, as you're saying this, I'm feeling more of you're already speaking as more skeptic versus being opportunistic, because you do have to have difficult conversations to build anything extraordinary. And I think that is what's important, is that we have a level of transparency as these things go on. Because now Africa does have all of these resources. So if someone is going to invest in us, obviously they are going to want something. But what does that something look like? And I think this is par for the course. You can't build anything without having a beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
Mylan, across Africa, there's been history of construction banks or investment banks that are necessarily special purpose vehicles that are supposed to fund, infrastructure development. And they've tried to raise money in the same way, and they're falling victims to the same particular trend. And that's my concern. Again, you can't reinvent the wheel. There is a history. There is a history of raising money this way and what it actually, procures in the end.
And I think that's a good conversation and an important point, right? Because we need to talk about what doing it differently should look like, right? So we don't like the old model. We believe that should change if these nations really want to assert their sovereignty. That's what I'm hearing you say. So what does that new model really look like? Fanta, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we do have to give hats off to the Sahel states for the attempt. In Islam, we say it starts with the intention. Right? If you want to do something, it starts with your intention, purifying that intention, and it's based on how purified that intention is that will truly facilitate the implementation, the execution, that very thing that you want to do. And it's no different here, right? It is not by error or whatever adjectives that may be applied using the Islam example, because God is centric to development. And in this case, what the Sahel states have demonstrated thus far is it's coupling intention with execution and practicality. Everything they have said they're going to do, they've done. We've seen it right before our eyes. So the notion to start off or to start from a place of doubt, of sowing seeds of doubt. These guys are just joking. They're not going to do it. What are you talking about? This is 419. I haven't seen evidence of that. I've seen evidence of a group of people who are truly serious about their sovereignty and who are truly putting into a place fiscal policies, economic policies to truly not just solidify their sovereignty, but move towards a more self-reliant, that are wealthier for their people, and is evident
Mm-hmm.
in the work they have been able to do. The AES Bank is no different. It's no different. Regardless of the mechanism, I know the intention is pure, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore they have put a lot of thought, right? They have been very thoughtful and intentional about establishing an entity that is free of Western hegemony. That
Mm-hmm.
I have confidence in. That I believe. And therefore, I am very much convinced that this is going to happen, irrespective of what the critics might say about it, which is fine. They're entitled to their criticism. I absolutely believe in the Sahel state's ability to establish this economic powerhouse to fund their infrastructure projects. As we've seen with the Ethiopian dam, right? When you have a vision, when you have leaders who have a vision, who are not on the Epstein list, who have a vision, who are not under the thumbs of Western powers, they drive that vision, they galvanize their people around that vision, and they see it come to fruition. Even if it takes 10,000 years, it's going to happen.
So, Fanta, are you not concerned about what Nee is saying, that about the model, right? That if you're still raising capital from the West, from Asia, from, all over the world, there will be strings attached. So we're risking repeating the same cycle that we're trying to break, right? Are you concerned about that at all?
No, I'm not concerned. And let me tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen what we understand. And as much as me likes to believe that my approach is very nationalistic and very much anti anything external, it's the opposite of that. I advocate for a balanced approach. What that looks like is have understanding what your leverage is, right?
Mm.
And leveraging or negotiating from a place of power. These three countries combined, like I think I was looking at the numbers, they produce 20% of the world's uranium,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? They produce, I think, upwards like 60 or what, like 40%, sorry, of the world's gold.
Yeah.
Is under their sword. Their
Yeah.
ability to have a different type of conversations with anyone interested in FDI is very different from yesterday's.
Yeah.
Right? They would not be negotiating from a place of subjugation. So they can say, look, we are not opposed to Western investment. Western powers come and sit across the table from us. This is what we have. This is our leverage, right? You want to invest. We're open to doing business with you, but it's going to be on our terms. So there's a difference there. With the concerns that Nee is putting forth, I don't see that to be much of a concern, because the power dynamic has shifted. And they have demonstrated that look, there has been investment, much larger investments, much larger proposals from countries like Saudi Arabia or even Russia saying, here, take our billions, right? We're going to give you money to do whatever it is that you want to do. The Sahel states have pushed back to say, no, we don't want that type of relationship. So therefore, they are not on the losing end, right, of the deal, as often African leaders are, because once again, most of them are on the Epstein list.
So Fanta, you have absolute confidence that they would be able to negotiate differently, leverage their resources. One of the things I always say is that these countries are cash poor, but they are resource rich, right? Like many African nations. So you have confidence that they will be able to leverage their power to negotiate better terms. Myling and Nee, do you also have the same confidence?
Well, like I said earlier, I think in anything that you're investing, you do need partners. And if you go into any type of a setup and you only think about what the history of failure was, then get the hell out of it. And me, respectfully, that's what I feel most of your positioning has been, is everything that's happened. A guarantee is the past stays there. The guarantee of the future is you have an opportunity to change it. And I think that is how I view it. So I encourage these countries to do this. And if anything that we see what happened in Ethiopia is that, like I said, the education is there. And that is what was different in the past with Africa. We weren't coming educated. We weren't coming knowing our value. Now it is different, because now you have a portfolio to start saying, well, we've done this, we've done that. And Burkina Faso, we're talking about this, but they're also working on the electric cars. It's uranium. Like they have all of these different things that are happening that's not being publicized.
Solar panel factories in Mali. So,
and this is what I'm saying. So you have different things to add to the portfolio. And now you are coming to a table to say, hey, look, we present the world with a percentage of this. We don't mind taking your money, but this is how it has to go. So it's okay to say no, because you're going to find another person who wants to invest. I think of this as more of a Shark Tank thing. You get there and somebody's going to bite. Someone's going to bite. You might get 4 no's, but that one yes is the game changer. And that's where, I always try to stay in the middle, but where I'm disagreeing with you is you're focusing too much on everything that can go wrong versus everything that can go right.
Nee, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm sure some things can go right. I'm sure. But the point, the usefulness, Mylan, wait, a second. The usefulness of history in policy analysis or even structuring policy is so that you don't repeat, the mistakes of the past. And so when you learn from how some people have already tread the path that you are not treading, you get to sort of reconfigure and reshape your steps. And so that is what I'm advising. I started by saying that any opportunity to exert sovereignty, any opportunity Africans deem to, exert sovereignty, it's fine. The point still remains that you are operating within a world where forces would like to sort of condition the options available to you and also compel your choices. And that is what any country that says that it is steering away from Western hegemony must understand. The fact that you do not want to, be a subservient state or subjugated by what you call Western enemies doesn't mean necessarily that you found that thing that is going to take you out of the pit. Let me just say this. There's an interesting paper by, it's an American. I don't know if you read an American's paper, but it's a white American, and it was talking about the most one of the most interesting. I will email you that paper, Fanta. And he was talking about a very interesting thing.
What are you talking about? We don't have any.
Thank you.
Like, why do you?
Thank you. Now, so he was making a very
trying to start trouble, Nee. Stop it.
Let me just say this. So when you're,
it's a thing of respect. You respect me, I respect you. We engage in a mutually beneficial, a mutually beneficial level, right? I'm not subjugated to you. You're not subjugated to me. White, blue, black, green, or purple. So
wait, let me finish the point. Let me still finish the point. When Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere thought of Pan-Africanism, they thought of Pan-Africanism in a very, very nationalistic sense. And then they realized after getting independence, and when Ghana, after Sudan 56, Ghana 57, Tanzania 62, when all these countries got independence, especially the scholarly ones among the leaderships realized, it's actually not enough to just be independent. You need to find a way to broaden your base in order to have a bigger bargaining chip on the global stage. And they realized the deficiencies of nationalism. And so even anti-colonial nationalism, or being anti what these days we call neo-colonial nationalism, would not necessarily save you. You need to develop a new body of knowledge beyond the things you've known. And I wouldn't want to blame the folks at the AES, in the AES, because this is the way they've known. This is the way they've known for infrastructure development to happen. This is the only thing they've known. And I think
you have a point,
and so
right?
This is actually,
I think you have a point, Nee, but if you were advising the AES, right, on this bank, this new model, what would you tell them? What would you be a message and advice to them in terms of building a model that you feel will prevent the region, or will, from being subservient, from it falling into the same old trap? What would you say to them? What does that look like?
Interestingly, the three countries are in talks to rejoin the ECOWAS as a sort of tripartite nation. And when that happens, I would hope that the argument they more than everyone else makes, is the need to sort of all the plans that have been on paper since I was 10 with ECOWAS starts manifesting. The idea of having a West African Economic Monetary Union, the point of actually having cross-border movement of persons and goods that actually works, and not just the ones that the people in the Secretariat say works. The facts of having a broader and again democratic sort of economy in that sub-region. That those plans have always been touted. It's been,
but again, what is the new model?
And I would hope that
what is the new model?
The new model will be to raise whatever resources you need within the sub-region.
Okay,
that will be the new model.
So say no
partnership
to foreign investment, to foreign capital. Period. That's the model that you believe will move us forward.
I'm saying that you need to be skeptical. You need to be skeptical of whatever monies come from outside of your country. Even within your country, you still make, there are still reasons for people to be pissed off with the elites in their countries, because the elites in their countries are actually sold the people to Wall Street. This happens.
So then don't you agree with what Fanta and mine? And then it comes down to how you're negotiating. Because to your point, your own people can screw you over too.
Yeah, but it's not about negotiation.
But
it's not about negotiations.
In any business,
it's not.
Deal,
so what is it about?
Before it gets to,
it's not about negotiations.
No, it starts in the negotiations, Nee. Like, no one is going to say, hey, let me just give this country money with no strings attached. They're going to want to know what they get from it, and the country is going to want to know going to state what they're willing to give up to get it. That is where I think that is where, for me, from a business standpoint, is I can sit at the table with you and know if it makes sense for me and if it doesn't make sense for me. And 100%, it's not going to be a smooth ride. You'll hear some no's, but I'm damn sure you'll hear a lot of yeses. Because
but it's not about negotiations. It's not about negotiations. It's actually not about negotiations. It's a capacity to offer like an avenue for countries to cooperate, right? What I mean is, for instance,
that's negotiation. You're over analyzing negotiations.
I am not over analyzing. Again, I said, oh my God. I have told you guys that you are not going to find solutions to decades old problems on a 1 hour podcast. You are not.
And we're not looking for
that's actually what you are trying to prefer. Do this and that. No. You are not going to do that.
We're not.
You are not going to do that.
We're not.
What you're going to do, what we are going to do to help anyone listening to us, is let them understand the scope of the problem and why, even though they are, again, well-intentioned and I'm sure they have Africa in their hearts, the point still, the most important thing is that you need to contend with the facts on the ground. And the facts on the ground pass it that if you are a country and negotiating your way through this world, and you are in Africa, you are likely to be screwed over if you are not trying to build a broader base within the continent. You are likely to be screwed over.
Okay.
And so that is what I would like to see.
Right? Mm-hmm. You're making contradictory statements. First, you're saying Africa cannot exist by shutting the world out, right? Without having external partners. Africa needs external partners for Africa's growth. First, you say that. Then you say the AES model of adopting a sort of a partnership, right? Or allowing Western entity to invest, right? Is contradictory, right? It indicates they are not quite serious about their sovereignty, and because
that is not what I'm saying. I am saying that it always remains a threat.
Like Western model, right? Because their model is Western.
It always remains a threat.
I think what they're saying, that the rest of, I think everything is a threat, right? I think what they're saying is what matters are the terms and conditions, right? Isn't that what matters in any deal? The terms and conditions. If you can negotiate, come to the table with what you have and negotiate from a place of power, right? Isn't that really what should matter? Or is there more? Is there more? This is the question.
That's not what. That's not what's going to matter, because if, for instance, right, let me give a very. I think I'm getting too theoretical. Let me get very practical here. Mm-hmm. If, for instance, you have been invited to put money in this AES Bank, the first thing you're going to ask is, what is the capacity of the governments in each of these, units to sort of maintain law and order? What is, and because anybody who puts money into it, the reason people actually like to put money or have money in dollars is that the American state is a good storage of value, right? When people keep the dollar, they know that the dollar. No. That's actually why people keep foreign currency.
I think we want. We want practical solutions, right? Because here's the reality. Here's the reality, Nee, right? The reality.
You're not getting practical solutions on it. These are decades old problems. But this is not like a doctor telling you take these 2 doses of that and then you'll be fine.
Understood. But I think
it doesn't work like that.
Right now, right? Africa doesn't have money. What it has is resources. Let's be honest. We need money to build our infrastructure. We need money to develop our industry. So where is that money coming from? What we have is our resources, which we can trade, right, with the world, and get the funding, the capital that we need to develop our industry. So how are we going to do that if we do not put in place investment models, and not even so much models, but if we do not come to the table with strategic, investment opportunities and leverage?
To the table as Africa. Don't come to the table as 3 states that have, banded up together because they have problems with like the regional body in Africa. Come to the table with a bigger bargaining chip. I guess that's what I keep trying to reiterate.
No, what you're doing is
come to the table with a bigger bargaining chip.
No,
and also try to find solutions within the continent first.
Yeah,
that is what I'm saying. I'm not even saying something radical. I'm saying things that.
No, what you're saying is the very lines. Is the very lines that is going to keep or has kept Africa divided, has made Western hegemony to flourish, right? It's those very lines to stoke this ideology of, first of all, the underlining, right, is Africa is incapable to unite as a force, right? But then you're saying Africa's
why is Africa incapable of uniting?
Hold on 1 second. Africa problems cannot be solved but with Africa united. So then you're also saying in the same flash, right? You're also saying the attempt to get to a united Africa is going to fail, right? For example, we have 3 states and more expressing interest to join, 3 states that have come together.
Which countries want to join the AES?
Hold on 1 second. We have 3 states that have come together to make up the Sahel states, right? They've put aside their individual nationalistic, right, identities and to say, look, we must galvanize and we must unite and put our resources together to ensure our growth, our sovereignty, our sustenance. And we do that by uniting. This was their side meeting they had when they went to that ECOWAS meeting to say, look, these guys in the ECOWAS are not for Africa or not for any of our benefits. We must show them the way, we must demonstrate how to actually do it. So the 3 of them went aside and decided, look, we must come together. They did that, and they're making significant progress. Now, even countries like Botswana, right? Other African countries are looking to the Sahel and their model, right? They're looking to join them. So
I'd like to see reference for that.
what they have put forward, you can
I'd like to see a source for that.
publicly available data. You can Google it. What they are saying, not just saying, what they've been able to demonstrate is that, look, what we did here 2 years, 3 years ago is working, right? And now we want to take it forward. We want to move it forward. And the way we do that is establishing financial sovereignty. You're saying that is bogus. That cannot happen, because the only way that happens is if all of Africa come together. Well, this is the path.
It
Right.
takes it takes one
And you're
person,
getting that. So,
or in this case, one
what do you
country.
understand? Because I'm super confused how you're saying.
You know, it just takes countries to start, and that's what we're seeing here. And
Yeah, but we don't. You can't run on motivational speeches. You can't actually run a state on motivational speeches. You don't run a state.
So let me
You
ask.
can't substitute.
Let me
guys
ask
are
me.
they're giving you financial contributions. They've laid out a game plan for what they're planning to do, right? And you're still saying that they're running on a motivational speech.
Nee,
No.
let me ask a quick question,
Okay.
right? So these countries, the three AES nations, combined control about 50% of the world's gold reserves. 50%. Let's just start with gold. Do you not see how, right? If leveraged properly, that could be transformational for their vision and what they're trying to do, just by the mere fact of what they control, the resources that they control, the three of them right now.
So this is interesting because there are two things you're forgetting. One, the gold would have to be mined.
Where's the money gonna come from? That is exactly my point.
Exactly, that's
why
the point.
They need a financial institution. That's why they need to raise money. And you're saying that they need to go to African nations to raise money, but the money is not there. And we're saying that they need to they need to use their leverage to raise the capital that they need to build those industries.
All I have
ahead.
said
Yes.
is that the model they are implementing will not necessarily save them from the problems that they've attracted with France and the US. It will not necessarily save them. And so it is important to maintain a very healthy dose of skepticism even when you are entering into these agreements. That is all I have said.
Absolutely.
I'm not I'm not telling you that they are bound to fail. I am telling you that this model will not necessarily save you from the problems you had with France and the US and whatever Western partners exist.
Okay, guys. All right. So let's move on, because we're at time already, right? But I do want to talk about the diaspora. So in my episode that I did about the AES Bank, I asked viewers a simple question, which was that if there was an opportunity for you to invest in this bank, would you? And I was honestly shocked by the outpouring of support, right? People saying, yes, just tell us how, right? Emails of people saying, Sandra, find the channel, we would do it. So then it made me wonder, is the diaspora Africa's most underutilized weapon in terms of funding our future, funding our development? And if so, what would it actually take to turn all of that passion and goodwill into real organized capital that transforms the continent? So I'm going to start with Mylan here. What do you think about that? And do you think governments are even serious right now about courting diaspora investment? Are they doing it at all? And if so, are they doing it the right way?
Well, definitely what I think is people willing to donate and contribute to make Africa a big thing. Look, I think it's a great idea. And because there are an outpouring of Africans who have not been back home that would love that experience. Because this has, and where I see the tipping point is, you're having so many Africans be educated over here who are willing to take that knowledge to go back home and to expand their country.
Yeah.
Because it's theirs. The situation here is, I think it's great for folks to build homes back home and all of this, but imagine if you are building your own bank. So now when you go there, we eliminate that strain for cash style transactions. People can go there and have African established mortgage companies, banking institutions where they can get loans to start that. So I think contributing is, Nia, I already see you laughing. So I'm more interested to have you, but I do think it's important that, because there's a huge group of Africans who have not been back home.
Yeah.
And they want to get invested. And I feel they are the ones who are making these trips across and saying, look, I can do this there. I can do that there.
Yeah. So the diaspora played a huge role in the GERD, right? Huge role. Yep. They sent money, they sent remittances. And I mean, the diaspora right now is sending about $100 billion a year in remittances home. We're talking about the AES trying to raise what? 1 billion. 1 billion. Okay. So imagine if there was an intentional effort and a channel for the diaspora to invest that 1 billion into AES. It would address Nee's point. Why do we still have to go to the West, right? So, I mean, how do we really move from just talk to really leveraging and mobilizing diaspora capital to fund this future of Africa that we all want to see? Nee?
Yeah. I mean, there are countries in Africa that are really, really dependent on, remittances from abroad. I know, for instance, Cape Verde is very heavily reliant on its diaspora in Portugal, in Brazil, and the United States. Other countries in East Africa are also very heavily reliant on its diaspora. But please be reminded that this is also something that has not gone unseen. I know there are proposals among far-right nationalists in the US as well as in the UK to tax remittances, because to their imagination, you are taking from their economies and giving back home, and so you're actually depleting them. I'm not about to say that people shouldn't contribute to their homes. They should contribute to their homes. If you're not helping the state, you're not helping the nation, you're probably helping your family, a friend, or the community. So it's very, very important. But we should also be mindful of what impediments could be placed in our way. But for me, the bigger thing that I would hope an African diaspora can do is to check certain ideas. We are not going to be saved by capitalism, as has been done somewhere. We are not going to be saved by capitalism, case closed. We are also not going to be saved just because people have the best of intentions. I would hope that the best of intentions actually show itself through, revolutionary actions in these places that they are. It was Nkrumah who said that for the Black revolutionary to be useful, you need to actually show yourself in seeking or using the tools that the worker can use, right? So if you are an African, if you're an African in a diaspora, as much as I would love for you to send money to your families and friends, I would also love for you to basically strike. Use that ability. If really you are concerned about how to force a sort of relationship where the global North would have to listen to the global South, then you'd have to strike. Because that's actually what you have. Your labor is what you have. And so if you omit your labor, if you omit all these countries who have very, anti-migrant, anti-African or anti-black or brown positions, would have to see the possibility of a world where they don't have these people working, these black and brown bodies working, and what that looks like, right? And that is actually I know it's a radical position, and I should say that one of the fears I had joining this podcast is that because my views are actually very left-wing, I always sort of want to remind myself that I'm an international student. I am, in these days where they are very, very, all over the place, looking for who is saying what they don't want to hear. The point I want to make is like left-wing ideas about omitting your labor from the metropole. By the metropole, I mean the colonial metropole. Omitting your labor would even be more effective than just sending money. Send money, but also think about how to strike for Africa. It is not unheard of. Black workers in the South were doing that when Ethiopia was invaded in 1935 by Italy. They did that. They went on strike saying, you know what, if you don't care about our kindreds in Africa, we'll also not do work for you. It's a thing that MLK these days, who is very whitewashed, also advocated a thing like that. So I would also like the African diaspora to strike if they think that it would help the case of Africans on the continent.
Yeah. Fanta, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Look, let's remove what the diaspora contributes, which you're absolutely right. I think in 2022, the World Bank put that number at 95 billion. Of course, 3 years later, it's certainly over 100 billion, right? When we look at what Africa lost alone or loses from illicit financial trades, it's $88 billion. $88 billion from corruption, right? Pocketing cash being siphoned and funneled to where it shouldn't. $88 billion, just that alone. When we come to the diaspora and how significant their contribution is to the growth of Africa, I think it is understated, right? We can refer to the diaspora as Africa's super or secret superpower.
Yeah.
Africa's secret super economic power, right? We need to stop looking at the diaspora as an ATM, right? And really start looking at it through the lens of a long-term partner, right? Really establishing mechanisms for that long-term partnership, because whether it's going to be a missed opportunity, right, if we don't do that, because the diaspora is truly Africa's Wall Street waiting to be built. We need to formalize that. Let's quantify what that looks like. You have 100 billion. Well, let's just go on the lower end, 95 billion funneling annually to the continent. 20% of that, right? It's like what, 19 billion. Do you know how many GERDs that could build annually? Do you know how many infrastructure projects that could go towards just taking 20% of that? What the diaspora gives to Africa every year, it's more than the FDI and the aid contribution from outside of Africa. FDI brings in about 45 billion every year annually. Aid to Africa is around 29 billion. So you're literally licking the boots of others for 29 billion when you're stealing 88 billion, when you can get 19 billion very easily from Africans in the diaspora. That's the math. Let's ensure the math is mathing, because that's important.
It is.
That's what the solution begins, right? So, like, understanding that if only the diaspora unites and Africa understands the true power of the diaspora, the IMF and the World Bank will not stand a chance. They will be running to Africa.
And I think if even going beyond that, to look at the purchasing power of Black America, right, which is around $2 trillion today.
Have you actually looked? Sorry to cut you, but when you mentioned purchasing power among America's Black people, have you looked at the disparity within that community? How many people have? What percentage of people actually have that 2 trillion?
Of course, but
vis-a-vis what the rest have, because inequality among African Americans is growing very quickly.
Wait, can I just finish
among African Americans themselves?
Yes.
Yeah, can I just finish my
go for it, Fanta?
Right? Of how critical the diaspora is to Africa's growth and what we want to see for Africa's transformation and the future. So imagine a Pan-African mutual fund, right, where even as little as $100 investment are aggregated. Imagine that. That's the power of the diaspora, right? And the way we do all of this is with trust and transparency. So what that looks like is tech-enabled transparency, right? Absolutely. It can't be like on a paper. You say, oh, I'm transparent, but like, hey, I'm writing it down here. It has to be digital, to where the diaspora is able to track every dollar, right? And the way that happens, I mean, we can throw out solutions, but we can leverage like things like blockchain-based monitoring solutions and tools to create that level of visibility. The technology is available today.
Yeah.
Right? So the diaspora is able to track exactly, say if an African country say we need 100 million to build an agro processing plant, they're able to track exactly what goes towards construction, right? What goes towards like what item on the list. We can do that today. So these are solutions that we can actually implement.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down, as I said, to trust, because trust becomes like the currency. If Africa built it, I guarantee you the diaspora is going to bankroll.
Yeah. Nee?
Also, I don't think we define what the diaspora is. I'm sure we all spoke, taking for granted what the diaspora is. And I'm saying this because for far too long, there's been a growing momentum among African Americans and even Caribbean people, right, about how they are more concerned about, the sort of the preoccupations of their citizenship where they are, and not necessarily thinking about some mother continent. You get what I mean? Mm-hmm. This has grown bodies
and
such
maybe
as
that's the problem, right? Maybe that's why we need to continue having these conversations, because to your point, I think diaspora investment or, mutual fund like Fanta, proposed is not something that would only benefit Africa. It could benefit the Caribbean too, right? And that could be a model that we really put in place to say, how does the Black diaspora, right, those abroad, how do we channel some of our wealth, some of our resources, some of our talent? I think it also includes the talent and expertise, right? How do we channel that into our mother nations, right? And so, I mean, we can. Yeah.
I don't know if you would remember, but 4 years ago, you and I had a conversation about what could be meant as global Black identity.
Yeah.
And and what I did say then is that African Americans or Black Americans would trace their lineage to Africa.
Yeah.
They have black skin. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people who still view themselves as Americans.
Yeah, true.
And I'm not saying it's unfortunate that they are Americans. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the American sort of, American walks into the room and hogs the conversation and really, really likes to take charge, can also be seen in how some people express their Blackness. We saw the story of Tyler, when Tyler said she's the South African singer said she's colored.
Yeah.
Or Cardi B saying she's Afro-Caribbean. There's this sort of tendency to hog the conversation on Blackness. And so that it doesn't allow for other expressions of Blackness to manifest.
Yeah, but
I'm not.
Can you make your point? Can you make your point in terms of? Yeah.
I am saying that you would have to actually talk about that and find a solution to that, even as you talk about the capacity of the diaspora.
You don't have to solve that problem. Because we have 95 billion that is being donated.
It's already going. Yeah.
You don't 95 like Cardi B or whoever else who does not send $1 to the continent. We're talking about the demographic of Africans in the diaspora. Africans who have been.
So if you're saying it's Africans, people who left, say, first or second generation. If you're saying it's first or second generation Africans,
anyone who has sent money to Africa, that makes up that 95 billion, that makes up that 100 billion. That's what we're talking about, the economic impact of those people.
And Nia, I see.
But then,
go for it, Nia.
Yeah, but then that is actually a very, very small unit. Would
what's a small
sort
unit?
Of expand the number of Africans who have come to this part of the world and
but
then sending money back to.
But they're still sending 100 billion. That's the starting point, right?
Also, when we are talking about the monies, please understand how the monies are being used. They are sending the monies for subsistence. They are not sending money
Right.
for projects. They're
if
sending
I
money
send
for,
somebody
and lots of it
$100
has to do. A lot of it has to do with subsistence.
Yeah.
And again, this
You're
this
right.
is the painful thing about
Okay.
analysis. You
It's
actually
not
have to.
painful. It's not painful. It's actually very simple. If I send $100 to my brother in Africa, he's gonna take $20 to buy a bag of rice. That $20 goes in the economy. The rice, the person who's selling like the rice sells the rice to him for like $20. They buy the rice at $15. They have to pay $2 in taxes to the government. It feeds into the economy, nee?
Yeah, but that's no. You are actually talking about how money circulates. You are not talking about how money goes into production. No, and that's what I'm saying, that you need to look at how the sort of the graph of how the money is spent, and you realize that most of it,
understanding, because that's what
most of it is subsistence, and not necessarily to
But I think
grand projects like the Renaissance Dam.
That's
That is not what is happening.
But that's why we're having this conversation, because we're asking the question that is it time for us to look at how we leverage what we're already doing? We're sending 100 billion. That's why Fanta said, what if 10%, 1% of that is allocated, right, towards project? And if we can find a channel.
All of the money is not going to the same place.
No. Okay, Nee, we're talking about a new model. We started off this conversation with you saying we need new models for how we invest. We're discussing what could a potentially new model for the diaspora investing meaningfully in Africa, something that we're already doing. You're saying yes through what is subsistence or whatever. Fine, but we're saying that is it time for us to ask the very important question that if we're sending all this money and we're talking about we want to minimize our reliance on Western capital because it has kept us slaves for way too long, how do we leverage what we're already doing, the funds that we're already sending the continent to develop, our continent? That is the conversation that we want to have. I'm going to say something
very controversial. I'm going to say something very controversial. Which is to say, I've not said anything controversial today.
We'll leave that to our viewers.
even the monies we send from here to Africa is Western capital.
Yes, but it's money that we've earned. It's coming from our bank account.
Sure, this is very important. And I often like to oversimplify things because keeping the audience in mind is very, very important, because we need Africans to become engaged and activated and participate in these discussions. To do that, we have to use very, very simple terms and realistic examples. Today, I sent $100 to my brother John, right, in any part of Africa. I use a system called Sendwave. If you who are in the diaspora, you send money, you're familiar with Sendwaves or Remitly.
Yeah.
Remitly charges me $2 or $6 or $5, right, for that $100. The government of, say, I'm sending to Liberia, the Central Bank of Liberia says they have an agreement with a Remitly or a Sendwave that says for every fee, if you pay $5 fee, right, we're going to take $1 from that $5. That becomes to go towards the African Diaspora Bank.
Yes.
If every country in Africa
has
that agreement with Sendwave, have that agreement with a Remitly, has that agreement with Western Union, has that agreement with MoneyGram.
Yeah.
That's the simplistic understanding of what we're talking about, me. And it's absolutely possible, because you know what? Today, you send money to, say, Liberia, right? You send $100 like to Liberia. You pay, I think, like around like $3 or like $4 like with Sendwave. How much goes towards the central bank? If that central bank was taking a couple of dollars from there to put towards like the diaspora fund, imagine what could be generated, Lee. That's what we're talking about.
There's a system called PAPS, and it's partly financed by the African Development Bank, which is also partly owned by the US. But PAPS allows Africans within the continent to send money to each other at a very low rate. You could leverage this for, again, Pan-African or Africa diasporic relations. You could leverage the technology, at least the technology exists, but you could leverage the platform for something that it would be geared towards raising funds on Pan-African level. So yeah, it's one of those things you can look at.
Wow, I think we've been able to convince me on this one. I love it.
I will be willing to pay $10 to send wave if I know that $5 is going to the African Diaspora Bank. I would say, you know what, send wave, I'll give you $10 because I know where my $5 like is going. That's what we're talking about. Practical solutions.
Practical solutions.
Congratulations.
Oh no!
What a great! So that's a great place to end for this weekend, panelists. Thank you so much for another great conversation and discussion point. This was wonderful. Great ideas that have been shared. And to our viewers, right? Let us know what you think in the comments. And we really want to take some of these ideas to the next level. So, share your thoughts in the comments. Send a video to your leaders and institutions that, need to be aware of what we're discussing here and the solutions that we're all proposing together, us here on the panel, but also you in the comments. Thank you so much, panelists. It's been neat. Okay, final words.
What do you guys think about a book club where you recommend a book for, our audience every month?
I love it.
Yeah. So the idea of a book club. So if this is geared towards educating, maybe people would like to sort of, interact with literature. But that's just a policy analyst.
No,
problem.
I love it.
So
I think
I'm
that's a great
just,
idea, Nee.
No, I recommended a book last week, Nee, even though it wasn't in your
Oh,
policy.
yes, I remember.
The confessions of an economic hitman.
Yeah.
We don't state, right? We're going to formalize this. We have education is generically part of our movement.
I love
so
it.
we're going to do that without you even knowing that we're educating you. So I would recommend that book to you because I think it will be very eye-opening. It's called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It is an eye-opener.
I love that idea. So Nee, do you also have a book recommendation for us this week?
Conscientism by Kwame Nkrumah.
Okay. That's a good one. So then panelists, we need to have another panel where we just talk about the books that we're reading, right? And take away from it. So maybe once a month we do that. I think that would be good. Awesome. Thank you guys. Amazing conversation. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Hey you! Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.